Good morning, and welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Hawk Blogger, and it is a hump day for us here in Seattle as we cross over the middle of the week. And this is the first week of OTAs where all the rookies and veterans are in the same place at the same time. And looking forward to getting a little bit more news. Hopefully, we'll get a little bit at some point during the week. As of now, we've been able to have some fun conversations. If you didn't catch it yesterday, I highly recommend you check out the interview with Jarek Reed. He was fantastic. We had a little bit of audio issues. Unfortunately, I can't control how other people tune in. When he told me halfway through that he was a gamer, and I kind of knew that already, but I was like, well, dude, I should have had you. Why didn't you dial in on your good setup? But in any event, if you are a patron, good plug for being a patron over at patreon.com/hawkblogger. I cleaned up the audio so you don't get the feedback and you can listen to it and just hear his voice. He was a little quiet on the video, so I boosted it on the audio. I highly recommend if you haven't and you want to listen to the interview, I'd do it on the audio version, which is on patreon.com/hawkblogger. I also unlocked that for free and paid members. You just have to sign up and be a member of one kind or another, but you don't need to pay in order to listen to that. So I would recommend doing that. And I thought there was a lot we got from that. Jarek is recovering. First news, as far as I'm aware of, that anyone's been able to share, that he had a setback a little bit, had a scope in his knee, and he's feeling a lot better. He's back to running now. He's hoping to be on the field soon. I thought that was good to hear. And, it was fun to kind of hear him talk about Mike McDonald and the perspective he's got on his new coach. And he called him a genius at one point, and he says he doesn't say that lightly. I think we all can understand that. So that was a fun interview. It was great to have him on, and we'll continue to look for chances to have those kind of conversations when the opportunity presents itself. But there's another set of conversations I've been looking forward to have. We've had the first of these, but we have a number left to go. And today we're going to be talking about whether the Seahawks wide receiver group has got better or worse. And there's a lot of ways to kind of think about this question, and we will dive into some of them that I did a little pre-prep for, and then others I'm going to ask some questions out loud, and we will try to find the answers out loud as we go about it. And so a couple seconds, I will share with you some of the information about the receivers on the team as we've got it. And let me go ahead and do one more thing before I do that. I want to say good morning to Swedish Shinobi, who is a YouTube member. You can join as a YouTube member as well. The link is in the chat. It would be great to have you there. And it gives you access to the custom emojis. It gives you a highlighted part of the when you make a comment or ask a question in the chat or on anywhere on the site, on the channel. I'll be notified and I can give you priority to answer those questions and respond. So it'd be great to have a few more YouTube members. We've been growing quite a bit. It'd be great to even grow more there. All right. Let's get into it. I'm going to see if I can share here, and we will go over this question. The question of the day: is this wide receiver room better or worse than it was a year ago? One of the things that makes this question kind of fun is it didn't change that much. So this isn't as much a question of, okay, did they replace one player with a guy that's better or worse? And the safety room was much more that kind of question. When Jeff and I tackled that question on during this weekend, I think it was Sunday, you're talking about Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs leaving, and you're talking about Rayshawn Jenkins and Kayvon Wallace coming. In this case, a lot of the names are the same, but they're not all the same. So we do have some guys like Laviska Shenault that we'll talk about. We do have some undrafted free agents who may push their way on. No one thought Jake Bobo, although I will give myself a plug. Before training camp even started, I told you all to watch out for Jake Bobo. But in any event, there are some guys that could force their way on the roster. I think we don't know what we're going to get from D. Eskridge, who is another always question mark. You kind of call him a new player if he ever actually plays enough to warrant that. But a lot of the question, I think, for determining whether this receiver room is better or worse is projecting and thinking about how it's evolving. You've got this interesting combination of Tyler Lockett, who's the veteran and has some reason to believe that, obviously he's getting older. This might be his last year playing for the Seahawks. It might be his last year, period. Don't know. You've got second-year players in Jackson Smith-Njigba and Jake Bobo, who should be coming on. Then you've got DK Metcalf kind of in the middle, where he should still be in his prime and have potential to maybe get better, but we don't know, and we don't know. And then in addition to that, we've got Ryan Grubb and a new system, and we'll have to figure out how these players fit within that system for what we're trying to do, or what the Seahawks are trying to do. So I think this one's a fun question to kind of ask, and let's look at a couple of pieces of info as we get started here, and then I'm going to dive into all sorts of other nitty-gritty stuff, and we'll kind of explore this question together. But the first thing I want to do is kind of go through the different players and talk about some things that jump out to me. So this is looking at DK Metcalf, and hold on one second. I want to move this out of the way. So one of the things with DK Metcalf, as you see here, is that he sorry, I was trying to do something. Show without toolbar. There we go. Okay. Little new feature I'm going to try here. So with DK Metcalf, you see generally with his overall PFF scores over the years, he has been pretty steady. 2021, he was 80.9, 2022, 75.3, 2023, he was 80.0. Interesting. Okay. It's not actually showing. Never mind. All right. I was trying to spotlight something, but it looked like it wasn't sharing on screen from what I could see. All right. On the receiving grades, his progression has been essentially flat as well. It followed the same trend: 82.5 in 2021, 76.6 in 2022, 82.3 in 2023. Those are all good, solid grades. And if you look at where things changed for DK Metcalf, there was a time where his touchdowns, he was getting into double digits touchdowns. He had 12 of those in 2021. He only had 6, half as many in 2022, 8 in 2023. So he increased a little bit, but still, generally speaking, I think DK Metcalf is someone who should be a double-digit touchdown player almost any year. And if you're kind of curious about where he ranks for receivers last year, I'll tell you that in a second. DK Metcalf with his receiving grade last year, which was 82.3, ranked 18th in the NFL. So he's like, like we talked about, he is third tier kind of receiver. He is not an all pro, absolutely dominant receiver. He is a sometimes Pro Bowl level receiver. He is not someone who even touches the conversation of offensive player of the year, kind of, top end Tyreek Hill type of player. And he has not yet become like a CD Lamb kind of guy that can just totally dominate. But he is a very good receiver. He is one of the better receivers in the NFL. He is just not in the top probably 2 tiers of receivers. And from a touchdown perspective, the other thing there, if I pull this up and I look at DK Metcalf's production on that front, he had back-to-back years of double-digit touchdowns. In 2020, he had 10. In 2021, he had 12. And he really had his best year in his second year as a Seahawk. In 2020, he had 1,300 yards receiving and 10 touchdowns. He hasn't come close to that yardage total since that second year. Last year was the closest he got at 1,114 yards. But, for him to be in the really dominant category, you're talking about 1,500 yards plus as a receiver to be there. And last year, he just had 66 catches, which was the second lowest of his career. He had 58 as a rookie, but then he had 83, 75, and 90. And so he dropped down significantly in terms of his receptions last year. His targets also dropped, but not enough to make up for that. His targets dropped from 141 in 2022, which was a career high, to 119 last year. And so that's you drop 20 targets, but you drop, 24 receptions. So it's related, obviously related, the target and the receiving drop, but it'll be interesting to see if that is something that's going to continue with the emergence of Jackson Smith-Njigba, or how the kind of share of targets will change. I've got another number there we'll look at. And then an important thing for a DK Metcalf is his catch rate. And I don't have it shown here, but this has been something I have been critical of DK Metcalf for most of his career. I think he has not been a solid receiver when it comes to catching the ball. He had, in 2020, he had his career high, which was 64.3% catch rate. He's generally been in like the high 50s. Last year, he dropped down to 55.5%. It's not a great catch rate for a guy that you're going to want to have that many targets. If I take a quick look here at guys that are getting a bunch of targets, even Rashee Rice as a rookie, who had 131 targets, caught 80% of the passes thrown his way. Amon-Ra St. Brown, who just got the big deal, he had 190 targets, which is amazing. He caught 74% of those. CD Lamb, who had 197 targets, caught 73% of those. Michael Pittman, who's got a big deal with the Colts, 150 targets, 73% catch rate. And it just continues. Jamar Chase is 70.9. Tyreek Hill is 70.9. Brandon Ayuk is 70. Puka Nacua, 70. AJ Brown, who came in and was a teammate of DK Metcalf, 70%. He got 152 targets. He caught 106 of them. So I feel like this is a huge barrier to DK Metcalf being a guy that really warrants targeting at 150 plus is his catch rate's just got to be higher. His career high again is 64%. That's not really that's not really good. That's not good enough. Is there reason to believe that DK Metcalf will be better this year? I think the questions there, a lot of us are talking about Ryan Grubb. And I certainly think that Ryan Grubb is going to help DK Metcalf from a target perspective, but Ryan Grubb can't catch the ball for you. So DK Metcalf's going to have to change a little bit of what he's looked like as a receiver, maybe the routes that he runs, maybe the calls that are made that give him a better chance to have the types of catches. He will be a higher percentage catcher of the ball. But that's just an issue. It's something to focus on with him. It's also something where he has not necessarily been a great high point catcher of the ball. And so when you're 6'4" and you can jump, out of the gym, you'd expect him to be someone who's just constantly going up and over defensive backs. That's never been his game. He's not particularly good at coordinating when he's going to jump, at making the catch at the high point, at handling the contact that comes with it. And I think a lot of it comes back to just this ability. How good of a catcher of the football is he? And up till now, he has not been a great hands guy. And so I think that holds him back. Even with that as an issue, he is just an absolute menace. And one of the things I'm really curious about with DK Metcalf is yards after the catch. That's something that we have not seen as much in the offenses that have been run previously. DK Metcalf last year, let's see, where did he rank in yards yak per reception? DK Metcalf. Oof, where is he? Oh, DK Metcalf ranked 17th among receivers with 5.6 yards yards after completion, so yards after reception. I have a feeling that's something that could go up for him. I think that depending on how Ryan Grubb uses him, I think DK Metcalf could become a guy. I think one of the things he has not been utilized as much for is how good of a tackle breaker he is. He has had some fumble problems. He tends to fight a little too hard, but this guy wants to hit people. And if he can protect the football and they can give him a chance to do that, I think one of the places where DK Metcalf has shown some of his greatest yard after the catch ability has been on crossing routes. And people think about it running away vertically from opponents. I've seen him run away horizontally from opponents almost more effectively. And so we'll see. I have hope that Ryan Grubb will incorporate that a little bit more into the Seahawks offense, because I don't feel like DK Metcalf has been used as much in that regard as I would like to see. All right. So a little bit on DK Metcalf. There is a question from one of our YouTube members. Anderson asks, thank you for being a YouTube member. You can join as a YouTube member. Link is in the chat or in the description of the video. He says, do you think DK can get even better this year, or have we seen his ceiling? Yeah, I definitely think he can get better. This is really, I wouldn't say it's the last year to show it, but if he's got another level to him, this is the year to really let it shine. He is 26 years old. He should be in his prime. He is coming into his 6th NFL season. And I still feel like he has not fulfilled his potential. He's been very good, but he has not been dominant. He has not been the guy that you can depend on. He did show up a little bit. One of the things I really liked about DK that did show up last year that I don't think was as much something that was part of his game in previous seasons was he was a big part of the game-winning drives that Geno Smith had. DK Metcalf clutched up so many times last year, and that was a huge step forward. If he can kind of bundle that kind of DK Metcalf into more of the game, yeah, I think he's got another level. And I do feel like Ryan Grubb is a great opportunity to see that come to fruition. Okay. Next, Tyler Lockett. So Tyler, as we know, is not 26 years old. Tyler Lockett is a little bit, he's the vet of the group, and he is someone at age 31, almost, he'll be 32 this year, who the questions have been, there were some questions about whether he's going to be on the team this year. And he redid his deal. He made it clear he wants to be here. He took less money to stay. And if you look at Tyler's progression in his grades from 2021 through 2023, his overall grade in 2021 was 81, 2022, 78.9, 2023, 78.1. So it is trending down. It's not, I think one of the things to keep in mind here is he is not a bad receiver, or he's not become like, he's not washed, or he has not demonstrated that that's what's happening to him, but he is slowing down. And there's another number we'll talk about here in a second that talks to that. His receiving grade has gone a little bit farther down. So in 2021, it was 82. 2022, it was 78.7, and 2023, 77.6. Still very good. And a reminder, like 80 and above, 80 is Pro Bowl level. 77.6, like 70 and above, is above average starter. So you're getting still very good level of play from Lockett. It's just not quite the level it had been. But one of the things here that I wanted to call out is this touchdown trend. Tyler Lockett, he had a 3-year span between 2018 and 2020 where he went 10 touchdowns, 8 touchdowns, 10 touchdowns. And now he kind of continued that of 8 touchdowns in 2021, 9 touchdowns in 2022. That dropped almost in half to 5 touchdowns last year. The other thing that I'd call out with Tyler Lockett is he has been a good catcher of the football. His general catch rate through his career, if you go from 2018 until 2022, he's 81.4% of the passes thrown his way he caught in 2018, then 74.5, then 75.8, then 68.2, then 71.8 in 2022. And then last year it dropped to one of the lowest of his career, was 64.8%. And that's a little concerning. And I have some questions about whether that has to do with the amount of separation he's had. And in fact, let's do a quick look here. Let's take a look. See if there's an easy way for me to verify this. So yards of separation, average separation in 2023. Let's see. Can I find Tyler Lockett? Tyler Lockett. Average separation in 2023 was 2.8 yards. Okay. Let's take a look at 2022. Average separation in 2022 was 3.5. Okay, so it's gone down from 3.5 to 2.8. Let's check out 2021. 3.2 in 2021. So it's not like dipping down horribly. Let's take a look at 2020. 3.4. So it did go, what is it? 3.4 to 3.4. Well, maybe it's sorry. 3.4 to 3.2 to 3.5, and then last year it dipped down. Was the first time we've seen it dip down below 3. So his separation did decrease, and I mean it's a meaningful drop. That's almost almost a yard less separation than it was the previous year, and that could be part of the reason why his catch rate dropped as well. He might not be a great contested catcher of the football. We've seen him make some amazing contested catches, so I don't know that that's the right explanation. But it just was not as efficient of a year for him as it had been before. He had 122 targets. That's the second most targets he's had in his career, but he only caught 65% of those. Now, granted, that is still better than DK Metcalf, who was at 55%. And that's part of where there's just an inefficiency in this offense that I think we're all hoping to see Ryan Grubb can help change. All right, let's talk a little bit more about some other guys. Jackson Smith-Njigba, the rookie that came on, and his grades last year, 63.3 were his overall grade. His receiving grade was 63.9, and yards per route run is the number I've got shown here. I think it's a useful advanced metric just to demonstrate how much productivity you have as a receiver. And one of the things that obviously you can't show a progression year over year with JSN because he was a rookie last year. But I think people forget that he hurt. I think he broke a bone or he hurt something in his hand and was basically racing to get ready. He did play the first 4 weeks of the season, which was a little bit of a surprise, but he wasn't the same player. And I think he was hampered. It could have been the injury. It could have been just getting used to the NFL, whatever it was. His first 4 weeks versus week 5 on was a pretty big difference in terms of the player that he was. And case in point, his overall rating in weeks 1 through 4 was 47.7, which was the worst among any of the rookie receivers and one of the worst among all receivers in football. From week 5 on, it was 67.2. All right. Now, 60 is an average starter, 70 is above average. So you're getting up there towards above average. His receiving grade overall for weeks 1, his receiving grade for weeks 1 through 4 was 47.8. In weeks 5 plus, it was 68.1. And his yards per route run was 1.32. Sorry, it was 0.33 in weeks 1 through 4. It was 1.47 in weeks 5 plus. So just a much better performance from him from week 5 on. One of the things I wanted to look up here was I think a lot of people think about his rookie season as disappointing. And I get it because I think that has to do with expectations more than it has to do with reality. So if we look at rookies with the Seahawks, and we see where Jackson Smith and Jigba ranks. Now, I realize some of this you had one extra game, so we'll keep that in mind. But still, I think that it's worth taking a look at. And if we say first year, okay, and we say the team. I already picked the team. Hold on. Team is the Seahawks. All right. Where do you think Jackson Smith and Jigba ranks among all rookie receivers in Seahawks history in receptions, in yards, touchdowns? Pick your favorite. Yards per game. Interesting. So this is a fun way to kind of look at it. Um, as far as receiving yards as a rookie, Jackson Smith and Jigba ranks 8th in Seahawks history. I want to double check one thing. Yeah. So yes, Jackson Smith-Njigba he ranks 9th among all rookie receivers for the Seahawks. As far as receptions, he ranks 2nd. So I think that that's worth just calling out. And if you go to yards per game, he is right around where Tyler Lockett was as a rookie. He has a very similar, even though you have an extra game, but that should solve this a little bit. Tyler Lockett was 41.5 yards per game as a rookie. JSN was 37. Pretty much the same. Brian Blades, for those that remember him, was 42.6. Daryl Jackson, 44.6. Daryl Turner, back in the day in 84, had 44.7. Then it jumps up to 49.3 for Doug Baldwin, 50.4 for Steve Largent. DK Metcalf was second with 56.3. Joey Galloway, the most impactful rookie receiver from a yards per game perspective, was 64.9. I also think it's worth calling out that JSN's catch rate was 67.7, which was similar to what Tyler Lockett was as a rookie. Now, I don't think Jackson Smith-Njigba had a blowout rookie year that is unreal and, we should all be freaking out about it. But I do think that it's a little bit, people overestimates how bad, or I guess you could say underestimate his season as a rookie. And I think his utilization, the way he was used, was also just questionable. And I don't know. I want to say that a lot of that was Shane Waldron, but I also have some questions about whether Geno Smith trusted JSN and they had enough rapport and chemistry, because it took a while before he started showing up on third downs the way we wanted him to. And I just wonder, in those moments, Geno's going to go to the player he trusts the most. And I just don't know if I saw that trust from Geno early on in that rookie season for JSN. But determining whether this season's going to be better or worse at the receiver position is significantly related to how much you think Tyler Lockett's going to regress and how much you think JSN is going to progress. I am very confident that JSN is going to have a big jump in his second season. I think he may have one of the bigger jumps of any of the players on the roster. And if he doesn't, that's an issue. But I think that we should be ready for him to have a real breakout year, even if that comes at the expense of Tyler Lockett's targets and numbers in general. That's okay. In fact, that's probably good. And it doesn't necessarily mean that Tyler, is that much worse than he was, but it's just the way that this roster is built. We need JSN. The team needs JSN to start stepping forward. So I wanted to also show explosive catches and explosive plays. Now, this is just looking at DK and Tyler, but this tells a little bit of this story about the types of the ways that they're being utilized. And I think tells the more concerning story about Tyler Lockett and his production and what he's capable of. Tyler's game has consistently been, I think, about taking the top off. He's a great downfield receiver. He's been a great explosive player throughout his career. He's also, I've heard Robert Mays on The Athletic talked about him as just being an explosive downfield receiver. That's not, Tyler Lockett is a great route runner and available on third downs and available underneath. So he can do a lot of things, but he has been pretty remarkably good at getting open deep. And if you look at this progression, the 20+ yard plays for him have gone from 22 just a couple years ago in 2021 down to 14 in 2022, and then to 9 last year, 22 to 14 to 9. So he had less than half as many 20+ yard plays as he did just 2 years ago. That is a precipitous drop. The 30+ yard plays, which are kind of like those are the macro, the mega explosives, if you want to call them that. He had 9 in 2021, then to 8 in 2022, and down to 4 last year. So again, less than half. And 4 is not a lot if that's a big part of your game. Some of that might be protection. It may not just be who he is as a receiver. The offensive line has to protect long enough to allow for these longer plays to develop. But I think from what my eye was telling me watching last year, he's just not the same explosive player as he once was. And so if he's going to be getting the most targets on the team, which is what he did last year, that's an issue. I think the target shift has to happen. I think you have to be targeting JSN a lot more than you did last year. DK also, we'll talk about his explosive plays in a second, also should be getting more targets. But the thing with DK is, in order to earn those targets, he has to have a higher catch rate. You can't have a guy getting 130, 140 targets who's only catching a little over half of those. 55% is not, like, that is just not an efficient offense. You can't do that. Now, if the majority of those are big plays, then sure, you can expect a different ratio of efficiency when you're targeting farther downfield, but you're not going to get 140 targets with them all being downfield. That's just not how it works. So if you look at DK's progression himself, there's a little bit of the opposite going on, which is good news. And this could be a little bit of share of targets for these deep throws. But DK went from 11 20+ yard plays in 2021 and 2022 to 19 last year. So he had almost as big of a jump as Tyler had drop. So Tyler went from 22 to 9 over a 3-year span. DK Metcalf went from 11 to 19. Not quite doubling, but he had his biggest year that way, at least in the last 3 years, in those 20+ yard plays. If you look at 30+ yard plays, DK went from 5 to 4 to 11. So he did more than double his 30+ yard plays. And frankly, those are the plays we want to see from DK Metcalf. He should be capable of breaking tackles. He should be capable of earning a lot more of these big plays than we've seen from him uh, up until now. And so it's good to see that jump. My hope is that we'll see that grow even more this year. I think he can definitely eclipse 20 in this number, and I think he should. I think those are all the things that I had prepared as a visual. But I do want to talk about some other pieces relative to this question about whether this group is better or worse. And in order to do that, I got to jump out for a second of this view and grab a bunch of these other pieces here. Okay. All right. So I see, one second. I see another big question mark for the Seahawks as um what's going to happen with Jake Bobo? And he got a lot of hype as a rookie, and I get it, and it's fun and great. But Jake Bobo, one of the things that people don't necessarily appreciate or recognize about Jake Bobo is that he was one of the best run blocking receivers in the NFL last year. In fact, let me go ahead and pull it up. If I go to run blocking and I go to just receivers, I think he will rank among the top run blockers in the NFL. Let's go. Okay. Yes, Brandon Ayuk was the number one rated run blocker at the receiver position. He had an 80.2 grade. Jake Bobo was second in the NFL at 77.6. Interestingly, Jawan Jennings, another 49er, was third at 76.2. This is a valuable skill set for a receiver in an offense where you're going to want to be getting the running game going a lot more than it did. This is the biggest aspect of the offense that everyone's thinking about passing. I think one of the biggest changes in the offense is they're going to have a effective run game. I think Shane Waldron was terrible at this from a scheming perspective, from a sequence perspective, from a play call perspective. I think he was a terrible coordinator of the run offense. I think that's going to change significantly with Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff. I think Jake Bobo is going to be a big part of how that can happen. He had a 77.6 run block grade. Interestingly, they break it down by zone blocking, run blocking, or gap. Jake Bobo was even better in zone run blocking. He had an 84.6 grade in zone run blocking. Given that we're seeing that Christian Haynes is a better zone run blocker, we're seeing some of these other guys that they took, Laumea also in that way. I think there's some indications that they're going to be looking to do more wide zone and maybe a little bit more like the 49ers type of run offense. And that bodes well for Jake Bobo's utilization. And there's another guy that you may be surprised to hear is at least last year proved to be an excellent run blocker. His name's D. Eskridge. D. Eskridge actually had a higher run block grade than Jake Bobo, It was 82.0. The reason I didn't name him before is because he didn't have enough snaps. That's been the thing with D. Eskridge, is getting on the field. But it bodes well for D. Eskridge that he had that kind of run block grade. Another guy that did not get enough snaps but had an 80.5 run block grade is Derek Young. These are some of the names that I think are worth familiarizing yourself with, because I think there's more to playing in this offense than just being a great receiver. I think one of the things that can be important to get on the field here is what kind of blocker you can be, as well as a physical player on the outside. If you're curious, DK Metcalf, his run block grade, as big as he is, his run block grade is 53.3. I think a lot of that was likely due to some penalties that really hurt him on that. If I look out over the course of DK Metcalf's career, he has pretty much always been a bad run blocker. I mean, 50, 55 level. So I don't know that the penalties were the reason. He just has not been a good run blocker. Tyler Lockett, he had a 58.7 run block grade, and he's relatively been around that. JSN, his run block grade was 46.4 last year, one of the worst in the league, and something that he's going to have to take more seriously. First 4 weeks, I get it, when you got a fractured wrist or whatever he had, but they're going to need him to be part of the solution in getting the run game going. People underestimate how much Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Juwan Jennings are part of the reason that Christian McCaffrey is going untouched for 10 yards, 30 yards on some of those wide zone plays. So I do feel like that's going to be an under-reported, under-discussed aspect of this wide receiver battle. And let's talk about Laviska Shenault, who's another player who's joining. If I look at Laviska Shenault's grades, do they have his run block grades? Let's see. There we go. Laviska Shenault has been a good run blocker in his time. He didn't play much last year, so kind of throw that out. But the year before, 78.6 run block grade, 74.1 the year before. He is a physical player. He's 6'2", 220 pounds. He's also very fast. And this is a guy where he brings something that I think is a little different than a lot of the other players on this team. So he is a yards after catch kind of guy. If we go back, let me pull up the right season here. Let's go to 2022. I think that's the last season he really got meaningful snaps. I'm guessing he's going to be one of the higher players in yards after catch. Let's see. Maybe I'm wrong. Oh, maybe it's snaps that's keeping him out of this. Yes, that's what was. I was right. Laviska Shenault in 2022 was third in the NFL in yards after catch per reception at 12.4. This is a guy who really makes his name on catching the ball near the line of scrimmage, bubble screens, and breaking tackles, and being fast and going from there. He can be an explosive player, but he's going to get a lot of his catches near the line of scrimmage. If I could, there's probably some place I could go to see what his share of targets were at different places, but here's a good indication. His average, Laviska Shenault's average depth of target in 2022 was negative 0.8. So his average place where he's catching the ball was behind the line of scrimmage. All right. He was used almost like a wide running back more than a wide receiver. And he then turned that into being the third highest player in terms of yards after catch per reception. And as far as you could really say he was number one because the other two guys really barely played. He had 335 yards after the catch. They had like 43 or 65. So Laviska Shenault can be a difference making yards after catch guy. And honestly, the Seahawks didn't have that guy last year. They tried to use JSN that way. That is not who JSN is. They've tried to use Tyler Lockett that way. That is not who Tyler Lockett is. I think DK Metcalf can be that to some degree, but he's not a shifty dude. I think he can be used that way at times. I would rather see him used as a crossing pattern kind of guy to get those yards after catch rather than a bubble screen kind of guy or wide receiver screen. Looking a little bit more at Laviska Shenault's 2022 season, because I think that's the one to pay attention to. He did line up mostly outside, but he did get his largest percentage of snaps came in the slot. So 51.5% of his snaps came in the slot. He was a guy that did not drop many passes because these weren't particularly tough passes to catch, I don't think. And I just think he's a guy that likely also brings some opportunity as a kick returner, maybe as a punt returner. I don't know if he's done punt returning. Let's take a quick look. Has Laviska Shenault been a punt returner? Kick and punt returns. No, he's only done kick returns in his career. So I think Laviska Shenault is going to be a guy because he is a physical dude. He's a good run blocker. He's good. He's only 25 years old. People forget that. He feels like he's been in the league a while, but he's only 25. People also may not remember he went to DeSoto, same as Byron Murphy. So they've got that in common. But this is a guy that I just don't know if people really are. We have no way of knowing yet exactly how he's going to be used. I think he and Jake Bobo are going to be fighting for snaps. And where Bobo has Shenault is I think Bobo is a much more polished route runner and can be used in many more ways. I think D. Eskridge is going to be fighting for snaps. I think Derek Young is going to be fighting for snaps. Now, there's not enough snaps for these guys. There just isn't. If you want to go back and look at the Seahawks as far as targets last year, people always let's keep 7 receivers. Let's, we got to use all these 6 guys more. Well, here's what the target distribution was for receivers. Forget tight ends, just receivers. Tyler Lockett had 122 targets. DK Metcalf had 119, so they're basically the same. Then Jackson Smith-Njigba had 93. Then the next closest receiver is Jake Bobo at 25. And that's the 4th receiver. If you want to know the 5th receiver, the 5th receiver was D. Eskridge with 1 target. That does not make sense. Is that right? I got to double check these stats. I'm not sure I'm buying it. Hold on. I will give you confirmation one way or another in one moment. Let's go with receiving targets. Okay. That appears to be right. Cody Thompson and D. Eskridge had 1 target. So That's your fifth receiver had 1 target. So if you're talking about 6 receivers, 7 receivers, I mean, that's with an offense that was heavily people don't realize this either. It was heavily slanted towards the pass. The Seahawks were one of the most pass-heavy offenses in football under Shane Waldron. I think that's gonna change. I think it's gonna drop a little bit. So you're gonna have fewer overall targets. Now, maybe you're on the field more often. Maybe you're a better offense, so that gives you more plays, which gives you potentially for more targets. But in general, I think there's going to be a gravitational pull down on total targets. You could have a share shift of where those targets are going. Maybe you're not going to have a guy that's getting 130 targets, 120 targets. Maybe they'll be more like it was in the early Pete Carroll days where the top guys in targets are, in the like 90s, 100, something like that. But I just don't know where you're going to get even 5 players worth of real snaps on this team at the receiver position. If we just look from a snap perspective, let's look at a snap perspective. All right. Tyler Lockett had 834 snaps. DK Metcalf had 826. Jackson Smith-Njigba had 672. And then you get down to Jake Bobo had 303. And yeah, it just drops off. After Jake Bobo had 303 snaps, the fifth most from a receiver perspective was Cody Thompson had 23 snaps and D. Eskridge had 18. It's like tiny, tiny numbers. Derek Young had 9. So I think this is one of the real conundrums with the Seahawks at the receiver position this year. I think Bobo's gonna get playing time. And that might sound like an obvious take, but I think he brings a completeness to his game that's going to be hard for the team to not give him snaps. And Geno Smith trusts him, and he is a great catcher of the football. As far as catch rate goes, if you want to know his catch rate, I will tell you, I'm going to say it's got to be like 80. No, it's 76%. I think he maybe dropped a few in the last few weeks of the season because I think he was up towards 100% catch rate for a while. Curious if he has any drops. Let's look at 2023. I don't know if he had any drops last year. He's got like the opposite of DK Metcalf in terms of hands for me. Bobo. There's Jake Bobo. Okay. Now let's look at drops. Drop percentage. Let's see. Where did Bobo have? Jake Bobo had 1 drop. 5% drop rate. Tyler Lockett, for what it's worth, had a lower drop rate, 4.8%. He's got great hands. That's why he's someone that can have a higher catch rate. So this is all getting back to the point I was making before, which is Jake Bobo is a guy that runs the full route tree, has the trust of his quarterback, has proven that he can make plays and contested catches, will catch the ball if it's catchable, also can break some tackles. Curious, I didn't look at that. Let me take a look to see on this for him. He had 4.6 yards after catch. Not terrible. But he's shown some ability to break some tackles, and he's a good blocker. So I just feel like Jake Bobo's got to be part of this here. And I do wonder if that's going to start to come at the expense of Tyler Lockett. And I'm not sure that that's like, I don't know if you're trading up yet. People are like, yeah, Tyler Lockett's, he's fading. And while that might be true, Tyler Lockett, he's still definitely one of your top 3 receivers in terms of as purely as a receiver. He's one of your top 3. I think the other part to be aware of for this receiver crew is I don't think they're only going to be used as receivers. I think this year you're going to see more receivers used as runners. And there's 2 guys, well, there's 3 guys, but there's at least 2 guys in particular that come to mind there. One is Shenault. Laviska Shenault is done a decent amount of running with the ball in his hands over his career. And the other is Derek Young. Derek Young, for people that have forgot, he's 6'3", 215. He had a decent rookie season, dealt with injuries last year. He's a great special teams guy, but he also was someone who was used a lot as a running back, essentially, in college. They kind of ran the wing T, and he just would take it like end arounds, and pretty physical dude. He showed promise as a rookie. We missed him last year, so we don't know where he fits. That's another piece. D. Eskridge was brought in specifically like for that to be part of what he was going to add to the team, is that speed around the edge. He's been injured too much to be able to really justify that. I don't know if they'll use him in that regard. But that's the part of this team that I have such questions about how you build the roster, because you're in this transition period. I think JSN is very clear. He's going to do better and he's going to get more. I think DK Metcalf is at least clear in that he's going to be good. He's going to be very good. Tyler Lockett's on the team. We know that much. How much is he going to be used, and how is he going to be used? That's the biggest probably question. I could see him getting significantly less snaps this year. And that's where JSN's targets are going to have to come from, is at the expense of Tyler. That's where Jake Bobo's time is going to have to come at the expense of Tyler. And while I'm sitting here telling you, I think Jake Bobo is a guy that you're just going to have to play as a 4th receiver because of his well-rounded game, I will also tell you, this guy was an undrafted free agent last year. As much as we all enjoyed him, he has not locked himself in as a core part of this team. And it is possible that Laviska Shenault is going to get a lot of his snaps. It is possible that D. Eskridge actually does stay healthy and is the most talented of that group, and that they want to get him on the field, and that would come at his expense. The hard part for me is I'm just trying to figure out how they're going to, I think they're going to have to keep 6 guys at the receiver spot, and whoever they don't keep, I mean, we're not even talking about Aesop Wilson, who also was a very promising undrafted free agent last year out of Washington State. The practice squad's going to be a competitive place as well. And if you're looking at the 5th and 6th receiver, they've got to be good special teams players, because they're pretty much not going to be playing most of the time. Shenault is a returner. I think he can also play other special teams. We know that Derek Young is a very good special teams player. Jake Bobo is a very good special teams player. D. Eskridge was actually even a very good special teams player, although he got hurt. So yeah, this is where it becomes very hard to answer the question about, is this group better or worse? Let's go through it player by player for a second. Do I think DK Metcalf's going to be better or worse than he was last year? I think DK Metcalf in this offense is going to be better. At the stage he is in his career, I think he's going to be better than he was last year. Jackson Smith-Njigba, 100%, I think he's going to be better, and I think significantly better than he was last year. Tyler Lockett, I think will be worse. If anything, he will be as good, but the trends are that he is slowing down. And I think potentially it could be a lot lower than it was this year from a production perspective, from a playtime perspective. We could see a pretty big change, but who knows? That one's hard to say. I don't think Tyler Lockett's a bad player, but I think you can expect him to take a step back. And then of the other guys, Jake Bobo, Laviska Shenault, D. Eskridge, Derek Young. Those are all fighting for fourth. Like there's only 4 receivers that got any playing time last year. Now, maybe that changes the way this year. Maybe it's more spread out, but no matter what, I think that the 4th receiver spot will be better than it was last year. Last year was Jake Bobo as a rookie. Jake Bobo as a second-year player, I think there's every reason to think he will be better. But I also just have this feeling that Laviska Shenault is going to be a bigger part of this team than people realize and bring an element to this offense that Jake Bobo can't bring it. Tyler Lockett, JSN, DK Metcalf does not bring what Laviska Shenault brings, which is just 2 years ago, average depth of target was negative. It was behind the line of scrimmage, and he was essentially leading the league in yards after catch, 12.4 yards after catch. He's just a weapon that they can use in ways that they haven't had recently. So if I'm kind of making the case in general, I think that there's every reason to think that this is going to be a better group than it was last year. The biggest case to be made about why it won't be is Tyler Lockett was your number 1 receiver in terms of targets last year, and he has been your best overall receiver for many years, and he is the one that is clearly regressing. He's receding in his career. And so when your best receiver is pretty significantly starting to drop off, the other guys have to step up quite a bit. I happen to think that JSN is going to more than make up for it. And if he doesn't, it's a big issue. JSN was a first-round pick receiver. He's the only receiver John Schneider's ever picked in the first round. I think he's worthy of that selection. I think that he was overshadowed by a lot of other rookie receivers last year that were great. I think this is the year that he puts his name on the map. If he doesn't, then this receiver room will be worse. Like, just to be clear, Tyler Lockett's likely going to take a step back. If JSN does not take a significant step forward, then this receiver room will be worse. So where I sit, as I should say, is that I think JSN is going to make that leap. I think that the other guys that they brought in are going to be better than the end of the receiver. I mean, Cody Thompson is not the guy that's going to be the next up. Even just the depth overall is better. And the wild card here is really that 4th through 7th spot. I think Jake Bobo could take a big step forward. I think D. Eskridge could be the player that the Seahawks drafted him to be in the 2nd round if he ever can stay healthy. Every player that knows the game, that's watching the game on that team, they talk about D. Eskridge. They believe in him. He's just had injury, and Seahawks could be sitting on a talented player. It hasn't shown so far, but it would be great if it showed in this year. And then you've got, Chenault and Derek Young and other guys waiting in the wing. So I just think 1 through 7, much better. Top 2, that's where the question is, and that's what matters the most. Top 3, similarly, there's some questions there. But overall, I'm going to say that for the second position group in a row in this series, that the Seahawks got better at the receiver position than they were a year ago. All right, let's take a look. I think there's some questions looking here. Joey wanted to see what Baldwin, Tate, and Curse run block grades were in 2023. I can take a look for you. 2013, I mean. All right. Golden Tate had a 61.6 run block grade. Doug Baldwin had a 70.9 run block grade. Jermaine Kearse had an 85.9 run block grade. Sidney Rice had a 71.1 run block grade. Again, in general, all of these receivers were excellent blockers and a big part of that run game. Good question, Joey. Thanks for asking. Let's see if there's any other questions from members here. Yeah, so with that, I will just say if you haven't already given the show a like and click subscribe, I'd appreciate it. Head on over to patreon.com/hawkblogger. Get access to the audio versions of this as well as access to the Slack channel, which not only are we talking Seahawks, talking Mariners, which has been fun. I want to welcome some new patrons: Cynthia Shell, James, Matt Scornery, Marcel, Keith Gray. A bunch of new folks have been joining over there. It's great to have the community growing. And that's really the place. If you want to continue the conversation, if you want to get to know people better and kind of find other folks to share this passion with, the Slack channel is the best place to be. So patreon.com/hawkblogger for that. For the live shows, if you want to have the live show conversation and community, being a YouTube member is the best place. And so it's great to add them both. You can do that. YouTube membership is linked in the chat. It's also in the description of the video, and it'd be great to help the community continue to grow. All right, folks, that is it for this episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I'm Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Hawk Blogger. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.